What's going on, guys? Josh Carter here, One Objective Outdoors. Today's video, we're going to be talking about fall crankbaits. I'm just going to kind of be going over some of my top baits that I love to throw and, why I throw them in certain situations and all that. So I'm going to go ahead and get this boat uncovered. I got to get a few baits out of my kayak from the last video where we went fishing on the James River. If you haven't seen that, I'll put a link here. You can check that out. And go ahead and get my crankbaits together. And we're gonna talk cranking, so stay tuned. Alright guys, like I said at the beginning of this video, we're going to be talking about fall crankbaits. Now, I know that it can be a little overwhelming when you go into a tackle store, like your local tackle store, and they got a crankbait aisle with shallow runners, deep divers, you got square bills, you got flat sides, you got wide wobbles, you got so many different styles of crankbaits. And if you're new to cranking, you're still trying to figure it out or learn it, like I say, it can be a little overwhelming. So I'm going to try to break down a few things in this video just to kind of show you guys from my experience of how things have worked with me on crankbaits. And like I say, each lake's going to be different. Each lake is going to have that special color it's hard to beat, so but for me, fishing Smith Mountain, fishing Leesville Lake, Bugs Island, Gaston, all those lakes, these are colors that work best for me. So the fall is a really good cranking time. You got the fish pulling in the backs of the creeks, or you just got them pulling up on the bank feeding early in the mornings on the riprap, especially if you get, unlike this year, which is weird. I don't understand the weather this year. It's it's actually 81 degrees right now, and it's November 5th or 6th. I can't remember. November 5th or 6th. I can't remember. And it's extremely hot out here. I mean, who'd have thought that I'd be wearing shorts and short sleeve shirt out here? It's a nice little breeze blowing, but so the fish have been a little bit different this year. They're wanting to move. The water's trying to cool off. We did have some cool nights, and now we're starting to have warm nights again. So the fishing can be a little difficult, so it's always good to have a handful of different crankbaits to throw to cover several different scenarios. But I do have a couple baits that can kind of help you cover a little bit of everything, and then you can dial it in from there. So, but let's go ahead, let's dig into these baits, and I'll show you what I'm working with. Alright guys, like I was saying earlier, it can be a little overwhelming with crankbaits. You got, your flat-sided crankbaits. These are, this is a Rapala SR series. This is your 6 cents flat side deep divers. These are got the longer bills on them. You got your more of a wider wobble baits. Like your this is the Spro rock crawler. You got your DT 6s, 8s, 10s. This is a Rebel WeAre. They still make this bait, but they don't make this bait in this color no more. This is actually, I shouldn't be telling you guys, this is a secret. This is a bait that I love to throw a lot. I've had a lot of success off of this bait, and like I said, it's just hard to find that bait right now. And then you go to your square bills, where you got like the Spro Little Johns, you got the Rapala Brats, you got the Strike King square bills, and you got another, this one's like the RC, this is RC series, but this is a smaller bait. Now, each have their time and place and all that. So for the fall, for me, since a lot of the bait fish are smaller, if you go in the very backs of the creeks, this is a good way to kind of tell if you can get in the very backs of creeks, if the bait fish are way back there, or if they're pulling up top. Is just kind of get close enough and just let them come up by your boat, see what size they are, and you can start matching the hatch. I throw spinner baits a lot, and that's what I do with my blade sizes, and I also try to do that with my cranking. So, but a lot of times for me, this time of the year, especially when it really starts getting cool, when you start getting into, like I say, this year's different, but when you start getting into late November through December, January, I'm going to be throwing more of a tighter wobble. This is a little bit deeper diver too, so I can cover the shallow water, because they will pull up shallow on those cold days sometimes. They'll pull up on the bank and feed, and I've caught a lot of fish in 45-degree water temperatures right up on the bank throwing a crankbait sometimes. So you get lucky, you get those good sunny days, and they'll pull up on them riprap rocks and feed on bait fish. But this is their, I think it's called Natural Shad from Rapala. But I'll throw these tighter wobble baits, and I mean they're just a Like this is a 6 cents one. It's got a really good color. But what I'm trying to do is keep that natural shad looking pattern going on there. So, but like I say, I'll start out most of the time mid-November on. I'll start out with one of these on the deck. And normally I try to have 2 rods for cranking. Now, if I'm kind of catching them everywhere, like, you know, you get into a little bit of a junk fish session, then, you know, you try to have 3 on. But I normally try to at least have 2 on. And normally one's going to be the tighter wobble, and then the other one is either going to be, if I know they're up in the trees and the laydowns, I'm going to go to a square bill where I can throw it right up into the nasty stuff, and I can bring it right through the trees and the laydowns and all that stuff, and not worry about getting hung up so much. Now, like I say, when you get into square bills as well, you can run through the same thing with like you would with a deep diver. You're going to still have your flat sides square bills, and then you're going to have your big wobble square bills. So a lot of times you just got to figure out if they want that real tight erratic action, or if they're just, you know, this like a slower, more non-reactive crankbait, something like that. Something looks like it's hunting more instead of doing that real fast, you know, shaking. You just got to play around with the fish, see what they want that day. But a lot of times, like I say, if I'm going to be throwing a tighter wobble deep diving, I'm also going to be throwing a tighter wobble square bill, you know, and trying to throw that up there in the trees and see what I can get. Now, if I don't seem like I'm getting much, or they're not reacting much to it, then I'll go to something a little bit more of a, you know, wider profile, wider bait. So, but also there's different sizes when you get to these square bills. You got your 2.0s, your 1.5s, your 0.5s, all that stuff. So mainly, like I say, the biggest thing is matching the hatch. That's what you want to do. So if you go in the very backs of the creeks, it's really super shallow, you see around a bunch of laydowns, you can get to these smaller square bills, put you on a spinning rod or one of like these BFS new bait casting. You know, the BFS stuff is starting to take over and be a big deal. So you can kind of go to the lighter action setup, throw you a little bitty crankbait up there and try to get that bite. Now the thing about these smaller crankbaits is it's got smaller hooks, so sometimes hook up ratios can be a little tough. When I was down there on Lake Pickwick for a kayak tournament down there for the Bass Nation Kayak Series, I was throwing this. The problem I was having, they were coming up eating it, but it seemed like the hooks wasn't getting as good as it was like some of these bigger crankbaits that have a little bit bigger hooks. So, but another thing I always also like to have tied on, because this you can cover so many depth ranges. So a lot of these baits can run in the, you know, the 10-foot range depending on what size line you run. So, you know, if you want to get a little deeper, you can go smaller line. I don't go much less than 10-pound test. When I go to square bills, I'm throwing, you know, 12 to 14-pound test. When I'm throwing these tight wobble baits, got that one in the carpet. When you're throwing these tight wobble baits or these deeper diver baits, you're trying to get a little bit more depth out of them, 10 to 12. Most of the time I'm throwing 10-pound test on them. Especially like these, especially the smaller shad wraps, I'm throwing on a spinning rod, so you know, definitely 10-pound test on that. I've actually gone down to 8-pound test on the smaller shad wraps and stuff like that. So, but most of the time I try to stay in that 10-pound test. Fluorocarbon, use Sunline, works perfect there. So, another thing too with your square bills, you can go to like I say, a 12 to 14-pound test in fluorocarbon. But a lot of times I try to go mono, and that is because I'm trying to keep the bait a little higher in the water column. It's got a little bit more stretch on it. Now, if I'm going with a rod, like you go with a medium action rod, you might want to go a little more fluorocarbon. A lot of times with a square bill crankbait, I'm throwing around cover, I'm trying to throw more of a medium heavy action rod. So you can get away with throwing mono with the stretch. But if you're going to go down to like a medium action rod, you know, you got to be careful, because now you got the bow of the rod, and then you also got the stretch of the line. So you want to make sure you get a good hook set, but you also don't want to have it to where you got too much stretch in your whole setup there. So, but the thing about these baits here, these 10-footers, is the 8 to 10 foot, shall I say, is I can cover different water depths. You know, if I want to throw it up here shallow, I can work it shallow and beat the bottom, tearing it up, tearing the lip all to pieces on this thing, hitting every rock, every stump, and working it all the way back to the boat. And you can work, you know, 2 foot all the way back down to 7, 8 foot. So these are great. Now, another thing a lot of people don't talk about this time of the year, at least I don't see it, is everybody wants to match a hatch. They want to throw shad patterns like I was talking about earlier, but also the fish are feeding on crawfish as well. They're pulling up in these creeks, and you got rock, and you got crawfish all around there, so they're feeding on crawfish as well. So some of these fish are so keyed in on bait fishing, they're seeing everybody throwing, you know, whether it be flukes or crankbaits or spinner baits and all that stuff, and they're all in that shad pattern. You can go over to something more like a crawl, like in a rock crawler or a wiggle ward or whatever you want to throw in that crawl pattern. It's just something different to throw at them. Like say you get on some of them good rocky banks, this right here, something good. You can keep, it gets down there, you can pause it. It's good at just making a ruckus, kicking up a lot of dust in the water. You can work fast, you can ease it through there. Just a great bait for that. So, but these are basically these are what you're mainly going to see me throw during the fall. Like say, I can throw these on points, around laydowns, especially like you getting those deeper laydowns. If they're suspending off the edges of these deeper laydowns, these tight wobble baits, they just work great for that. These here, I'm working on points as well, working different water columns, beating the bottom up. Also, you can kind of get out there, like say on some of these banks that you got a lot of laydowns, but they're deeper, and you just want to tick the tops of them, or you got some grass, you just want to tick the top of it. These baits here are perfect for that. These here, like say, laydowns, gnarly stuff, real shallow grass. If you can get it over top of them without getting hung up in there, ripping it through the grass. Also, something I like to do with these is, and I've busted a lot of them, so especially with the Strike Kings, they're a little bit cheaper. I go buy several Strike Kings, and I like, and especially in the sexy shad, is if the lake is low right now, we ain't had a lot of rain, so the lake is low, so you can get these really far under the docks. And when the sun's out real good and you want to get it way up under there, it's hard to beat a square bill way up under those docks, where you can kind of cast it way up under there and get to where the bank is, or go to the side of the dock and work at section really good. Hard to beat a square bill. But also too, in square bills and these crankbaits is, if you look at this square bill and look how tight, or look at the angle on that bill right there, and then look at the angle on the bill on this one. This one kind of curves in a little bit more, so this one isn't going to run as deep as something like this would. It's going to be, you can work it more like a wake bait on the top, and actually this does work great as a wake bait as well. So that's another versatile thing about square bills, is you can kind of work them slow enough if you need to be kind of like that wake bait if you need it to, and keeps you from having to change bait so much and all that. So crankbaits are very versatile, especially if you get the right ones and work them in the right situations. Alright guys, well, I hope you enjoyed that video. I just wanted to go over some of my experience with crankbaits and throwing crankbaits this time of the year. It's something that's really fun to throw. You get a lot of bites. I mean, you know, you might catch a lot of perch too up on the bank. You know, stripers love them. You know, if you're tournament fishing, it sucks to catch striper, but all in all, it's still fun to catch something like that. So, but you can cover a lot of water with a crankbait. You know, then if you get to some sections where you've thrown around a crankbait a little bit, then you can pick a jig up and flip around, or a shaky head, or drop shot, or whatever. But you really want to cover water, find fish fast. It's hard to beat a crankbait. So make sure next time you're on the water, you tie your one on, and let us know in the comments if this video helped you, and if you caught any fish on a crankbait lately, or if, you know, what's your favorite bait to throw in the fall? What's your favorite color? That's what I like to know. So other than that, guys, if you liked the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and we will see you guys next time.